Well, good morning, everyone. This is Charles Namey. Welcome to our real estate group here. Today we have a special presentation by one of our own, Deborah Sonnenshines. She is going to make a presentation about first-time home buyers. And we're so excited about having her make this presentation. So I will turn it over to Deborah and say welcome everybody to our meeting today. Deborah, it's all yours.
Thank you, Charles. It's so wonderful being part of this group. And as you know, we always have to have this disclaimer whenever we give a presentation that you see at the bottom of the first chart, which states that this is not legal advice. So usually what I do is because I have usually this is given in front of a group of first-time home buyers, either via, an event webinar or a physical group. So I usually introduce myself. I give them my information. I have been in real estate for 19 years, mostly buyers. I tell them where I went to college, and I explain usually my background, business professionals, and I always usually mention that I get most of my clients through referrals, who I am very, very, very appreciative of, and I always ask them for their referral if they feel that I should deserve it. Okay, so I go through this timeline, which all of us have one, but my charts, as you can see, they're kind of minimalist, and that tells you something about my personality. And you'll have to all say something. You'll all have your own personality, and everybody uses their own backgrounds and how much information they put in and how they describe it. But my presentations to first-time home buyers, I'm looking for a specific niche, and the niche that I'm looking for, that I know I work best with, are people who are not looking for a wheeler dealer type of agent. Oh, you can do this, and you talks really fast. I can do this, and you can do that, and I'm going to do this, and I'm looking for the people I work best with are the type of people who want information, they want assistance, they want explanation, they want support, but they want enough information to make a decision. They don't really want to be told what to do. And they also happen to be looking for someone who's a bit older and has experience in not just real estate, but other things too, because they tend to treat me more like a source. And a lot of them looking at me as, kind of like their grandparent or something. And that's the, well, whenever you do this with first-time home buyers, remember, they don't have any experience. So it's almost becomes a personality. What is that person looking for in a real estate agent? Okay, so first I talked to them about getting a pre-approval because it is a waste of time. And I tend to be pretty blunt with my clients. It's a waste of time for me and for them to go and look for a house if they have not been working with a lender, and they have to have a specific type of pre-approval. And of course, I explain the following to them, that a pre-qualification letter, as you know, there are some lenders out there who say, oh, we're going to give you a pre-qualification letter. And any experienced seller's agent know the difference between a pre-qualification letter and a pre-approval letter. And it also, I talked to them about how to qualify for the type of house they're looking for and the price range and so forth. And then I explained to them why you need it, because you absolutely need that leverage in negotiations. But in this market, and we're still in a seller's market, if you don't have one, then you're just not considered at all, and you have the right type. And we also know that in this market, people are still preferring cash to lenders. And we just need to be able to explain that to people, because it makes a big difference. And that means that also I remind them too, that it shows how serious you are. And as the agent, we work hard. But they need to understand too that it's not binding on the lender, meaning and there's another thing that changes with the market too, is how much that pre-approval letter is for. You have to have a discussion about whether or not it's the top amount, the most. For example, in this past market, If you didn't have a pre-approval letter that was between 550 and 600, you couldn't compete in most of these sales. Sorry about that. In the past, when it's a buyer's market, you don't tend to have the maximum amount on your pre-approval letter, because you don't want the seller thinking you're willing to pay more, or that you're able to pay more, and it impacts your negotiation. And I explained to them some rules that are on the side of the borrower, and I just talk about what's going on with the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau and all of the. I give them something to read. We don't spend time during the search for their house, but I give them something to read, because as you know, in Texas there are over 2,000 mortgage bankers. So I usually, if they ask me, I'll give them 3 names of lenders and let them talk to those people. But as you know, probably 90%, this is the last time I saw the data, 90% of those who are borrowing money to buy a house get their referrals for a lender from their agent. So I just want them to know that it's important to have a background about what goes on in the mortgage business, and that I'm certainly here to help them through that hurdle as well. Okay, so why do they hire a real estate agent? Why did my slideshow go away? Okay, sorry about that, guys. I didn't realize my slideshow wasn't on the screen. Hire a real estate agent. When we're hiring them, I explain to them that there's some paperwork that's required, and we all know that paperwork, so I won't belabor that. And I talk to them about what their agent's going to do, and every agent, of course, can customize that. But it's some basic things on here. We guide you through the process. We advocate for you, negotiate for you. Whenever you put it, for example, whenever you think that a house is appropriate, even if even if your client has not asked you to put in an offer, you still advocate for them. I explain to them, we always contact the seller's agent and give them some encouraging words about our clients. And when it's time to actually put in an offer, we negotiate for you. You want the seller's agent to feel comfortable with the agent for the buyer. And we obviously facilitate closing. I mean, all of us know. I mean, if we've done more than one closing, we know that we don't just hand it over to the title company and say, see ya, I'm on to my next client. Well, you know that we spend hours and hours working with the title company. So I explained that to them, that this is the first time. And even if you've bought, your client has bought 4 or 5 houses, like an investor, they still think it's kind of like magic. It just boom, happens. And sometimes you have to take the time to explain to them how much hand-holding you do. And I explained also that there really is no simple closing, none. So whenever people think, oh, we had a really simple closing, everything went smoothly. No, it didn't. You just didn't know everything that happened in the background, because, quite frankly, we try to shelter you from it, the clients, because we don't want them, getting nervous. And in this kind of market, they can get nervous and want to pull out. But what we do is adequately explain to them all of the work that we do. And then I usually will, when I give them my thank you gift, I usually spend some time explaining again all the work I did, because I want the referral. I tell them that they're available. For me, I tell them, call me anytime. Most of the time, I think it's rare that I get a call after, say, 10 o'clock. But I tell them, call me, text me anytime. And I answer whatever question they have. And if it's not appropriate for me to do, I will refer them to the person who is appropriate. And I also explain to them about the fees. And I guess those of you who are JPAR folks, you saw that recent letter that came from Tony about what you need to say to your clients, whether they're sellers or buyers. Well, that's absolutely important, because there is so much going on out there in the general buying and selling real estate, because everybody thinks they're a specialist and all kinds of things are going on out online that you really need to have a heart-to-heart talk to them about it, especially sellers. I know we're talking about buyers today, but every time I do, I tend to talk up the agency tremendously. I talk about the agreement, the contract, and I talk about the terms in the market areas and where they want, because believe it or not, I've noticed that recently clients start out in one area and then they have to switch to another. I don't push them. I usually will let them decide, I really can't afford to be here, or the houses, because we talked about this before in one of our meetings, is that this generation of buyers doesn't really want to buy a fixer-upper. They probably don't mind painting or getting a new washing machine or something, but they don't want a fixer-upper like past generations have. So that really means they're pricing themselves out of certain areas. We talk about who pays for what, and we talk about the protection period and any addenda and why there's addenda. Sometimes you just have to explain it because you don't want to send them things to sign electronically without having had this conversation in advance. And you want your agent to shop with confidence. Your client to shop with confidence. Once you've gone through that era, that period of reality, and you've gone through what they can afford, and you've talked to their lender, and you've talked to them about the things that you've seen. And I like to, for a first-time home buyer, spend 3 straight days, Friday after work, all day Saturday, Sundays as soon as I get out of church, and we just spend the time looking and looking and looking at houses. And one of the things I like to do is hand them copies of listings. They don't like things in paper anymore, but I hand them listings near where they want to look and cross out the price. And I said, we're going to go through an exercise this weekend of you guessing what you think those houses are worth, and then we're going to go, and then I'll show you what the real listing price is, and you're going to be shocked. But we're going through this exercise so you can go into this with your eyes open and know what changes you have to make. And of course, we go through some open houses because we want to talk to some sellers agents or people who are representing sellers agents, and we talk about opportunities and the fact that any market is an opportunity for you to sharpen your skills and understand what you want to do out in the real estate market, so that the opportunities that today, the opportunities are trying to get ahead of interest rates, or get ahead, or changing the type of house that you are interested in, or the neighborhood. And just I emphasize that every real estate market is full of opportunities, and it's just depending on their own personal ability to do or make choices. So we talk about, in particular, we go over the contract, just to make sure they understand what the contract is, because in this market, you really don't have a lot of time when you're trying to convince the seller's agent that your client is the best one for the deal. You don't have a lot of time, so you need to go over all of this information beforehand. So let's say you get to the point where the offer is accepted. Unfortunately, most buyers, especially inexperienced buyers, think that's the end of the deal, and they start packing up their apartment. They go and tell grandma, oh yeah, you promised me $10,000 as a gift, I'm ready for it. And they keep saying, oh yay, we're in this neighborhood, we're buying into the neighborhood with a really good school system, and now we can make sure that our kids are not deadbeats. They go to really good colleges because they're in a great school system, and so they're just high as a kite because they think that everything's outdone. And you have to bring them back down to earth and explain to them there's a lot of preparation. There's how you present offers and how you follow up, and that there's some more, that the real estate agent is there to seal the deal, help them seal the deal for them. And there will be a lot of effort as you go along. Yes, Charles.
Are we still supposed to be on page 6?
I'm on 11. You're
We
not
are on
sure?
page 6.
Ah, so I don't know why is it not sharing my screen? Why is it going backwards?
I don't know. It's not, it didn't move from 6.
It didn't move from 6. So that means my screen. So I'm going to stop sharing and then share again. You think that'll fix it?
Are you moving the slides down
Yes.
as you go through?
Yes.
Okay.
How's that? Are you on?
We are on page
screen
11. Yes,
Oh,
ma'am.
okay. So I should have, do you need me? I don't want to go backwards. I'll go backwards if you guys need me to later, okay? Because you only gave me a half an hour. Okay.
Take more than half an hour if you need to, Deborah.
Okay, but okay. Then we talk about the inspection because, as you know, the inspection's next. You know, I had buyers who were concerned about the inspection. I always insist on an inspection, whether it's part of the period, you know, for the option period or not. I don't care if, because you know, you can always get. I have never had trouble getting the inspector that I use to make, you know, special arrangements to get the inspection done. You know, like if, for example, if it's been so tight that we have to, we don't have an option period, that we have to get it done during the 3-day period for getting the money into the title company, then we do it at that time. Okay, you just have to, the agent just has to, in some circumstances, figure out how to get that inspection done, because I will never, ever encourage a client to not have an inspection. We just have to figure out how to get it done. And once the contract is signed, yes, sometimes you have to insist with the seller's agent. So I guess that's where your gravitas comes in with the seller's agents, is making sure they understand that, yes, it's not, this deal is not contingent on it, but my client wants to have an inspection. And I even will copy this list here and say, you know, these are the things that really, really have to, we're not going to be picky. We're not going to talk about paint peeling on the windowsill and things like that, but we absolutely have to have this. And we want to know it. And yes, we're not using an option period, but these we need to know, because if nothing else, depending on the type of lender we have, the lender needs to know. And if it's a cash deal, my client just wants to make sure that there's no buyer remorse. So we have a lot of conversations about making sure we can get in there with an inspection. And even for new construction, you still need to have an inspection. And we also talk about tracking the contract dates for the new construction, because, you know, all of you guys who've ever been through new construction know that the date doesn't really mean anything. You close when the builder is ready to close. So I need to make sure my buyers understand that, because especially if they're moving out of a leased property and into a new construction, they're going to have a lot of trouble with the coordination. And I always remind them, talk to your landlord and tell your landlord, you may have to extend. And yes, they say, oh, I don't want to tell them, they're going to double my rent. And you know, if you're a good tenant, and I can't imagine that they wouldn't be if they have the credit's good enough to buy a new construction. I always tell them, have a conversation with your landlord when you know that you're ready to buy and you're getting out of that house, getting out of that lease. Make sure that you have the conversation so that you have a lot less stress when you realize the builder's not going to be ready. Okay, we talk about the mortgage process, because there are some things that the agent can help them with. And a lot of it is when it comes to appraisals. As you know, Fannie Mae is now up to 80, Fannie Mae and Ginnie Mae, you know, the government GSEs are up to 80, are now up to buying 80% of the mortgages in this country. And they have been, you know, since the foreclosure crisis, they've been doing drive-by appraisals. And now they're doing what they call desktop appraisals. So that means even though you have a mortgage company and you have a mortgage lender that you're really happy with, they are going to sell that mortgage before you even sign the first check, before you make the first payment. So you need to understand the biggest problem is going to be appraisals, especially in this market that grew so fast. And I spend some time talking to them about that. We talk about interest rates. What I use is, depending on where we are, if it's very high and it's on its way up, I tend not to use there are a lot of services that send you, that you can get interest rate information on. One of them, I know JPAR has one that you can click on and boss and get the information. And there's some other ones I use. I like the one where it gives you the list of by county, the lenders and what their average interest rate is and the average mortgage, because I'd like to let my clients know that there's some research they can do as they go along in case they're interested. And we talk about closings. Okay, let's see what I have here for closing. Okay, I talk to them about when they really have an application and not, because that'll help them with getting their pre-approvals. And according to the CFPB, once they provide these 6 pieces of information, it's an application. And some lenders don't like to call it an application. That's why they do pre-qualifications and not pre-approvals, because legally they have to report that if they later are denied, they have to report it. And if a lender has a certain percent of denials on their record, they can be examined by the banking authorities for maybe they're doing there's some discrimination or something going on. But I just remind them that there are a lot of legalities, that lenders are held to a lot of rules and regulations that they might not be aware of. The bottom line is just be ready to fork over information that you might thought you didn't. Because some people think all they have to do is show their Credit Karma or credit score on their phone to a lender, and now they have a mortgage for $500,000. Okay, I explained to them that they need to look for this loan estimate that's required by law, and I tell them what's on it. It's basically in writing what you're going to have to pay before you get to closing. And then, of course, at closing, you get a closing disclosure, and you're supposed to have it 3 business days in advance. So if you have a mortgage, you don't have any excuse for not being able to provide whatever the amount is your down payment, and making sure. One of the problems we have now, and and believe it or not, this is quite common, is a lot of people put their money in cryptocurrency, and I don't have a client who did, I guess because my clients tend to be older, wiser. So the issue is that they're having trouble liquidating it. And and if they knew that they only had 3 days between the time they get the closing disclosure and the closing, then maybe they would have liquidated it sooner. So I think that's an important thing I tell them. If they're expecting gift money, or they have to liquidate money in a employee stock ownership plan, or whatever it is, a CD, whatever, the bank CD, they have to, I make sure I explain to them that you don't want to hold up the closing. And this is the closing disclosure has to match what that estimate was. A lot of times it doesn't match. And that tells you how good the lender is when it doesn't match. But the main thing is to make sure that you're aware of this. Down at cash at close on the bottom, that's where their eye always goes. The cash at close, and then the amount monthly. But to remember something that's really important, here in Texas, all these most of the homes sold have homeowner associations, and this thing does not include the homeowner association fees. Let's talk about financial assistance programs. A lot of first-time home buyers are eligible for financial assistance programs. They can get up to $20,000 in low interest loans, but they have to qualify. There's a limit to your income, and I believe most of those are around total household income is included. And the last I looked, it was around $175,000. And I like it because we have a lot of, for some reason, young people, there's a lot of teachers, there's a lot of police officers, a lot of people in the military, and it just seems like there's money on the table. But let me warn you, the TSHAC, which is the state organization that does them, usually runs out of money around July. And now, but it doesn't prevent me from talking about it afterwards. I tell them to go ahead and apply, because sometimes if they get, 1,000 applications after July, they can go back to their funders and back to the state and the Department of Housing and get some more money. They usually get enough, some extra money, but usually not enough to get them through the end of the year for all the applications. But my point is that and they're usually very good about first come, first serve. So get the applications in as early as you can. And as you know, they're funded starting in January. So it just seems to me money is sitting on the table, and I like to but sometimes it takes them a little longer to close, to get your money to the closing table. But as long as you have all the information, it's an application like anything else. So you have the money, you can get the money as long as your clients are conscientious about it. Now, the last thing is, it does have a deed restriction, but it's easily, that they don't want you. It's used, some of them, because there's about 100 different ways you can do this, because it's not just through TSHAC. They work with other organizations too. So they all have some deed restriction about what you can do with the house at the time. And you do have to be an owner occupant. Okay, let's talk about the title company. I know a lot of agents, and it drives me crazy when agents say, oh, we can't close. Title is holding us up. We can't close because of title. Title wants this. And it drives me nuts, because maybe it's because I have the legal background, that I know that real estate agents, when they're really committed to helping their clients, can help the title company a lot. And what does okay, let's talk about what the title company does. They obviously do a title search. They have to go back 50 years in Texas to make sure that it's clear who owned the house, so that even if you have a warranty deed, warranty deeds don't mean anything if you can't find the person who gave you the warranty, they're dead or moved out of state or something. They have to ensure that there's marketable title. And it's not, it doesn't have to be perfect, just marketable. And remember that a title company is in business to make money. So it's like any other insurance company. They can't pay out more claims than money they have coming in. They go out of business. So every title policy is an insurance policy to determine, where they make a business decision whether they want to sell you this insurance or not. So they will also review the survey, and they'll and that survey will include zoning information, because they want to make sure that whatever you're using the property for is properly zoned, so that somebody doesn't knock on your door from the zoning department of the city where you're located and say, hey, you can't have that fence over there, or you can't have that shed in the back. They also will get the things like the tax information and insurance, and get it for help the lender with it if they don't have it already. Nowadays, because of most of here in Texas, most of them are sold to Fannie Mae. Fannie Mae has a huge database that they just plug in the address to, and they get most of this information. But the insurance, as you know, the client has to buy their own homeowner insurance. They will review all these covenants, conditions, and restrictions. Every property, especially when you're in a homeowner association, it has 10 pages of covenants, conditions, and restrictions. And I guarantee you, most people, even if they read it, after they've owned the property for a little bit, they forget about the restrictions, and they don't hear about it again until they get ready to sell the property. They'll draft a deed, and the title company will communicate quite a bit with the agents about the dates in the contract. They live and die by the dates in the contract. And if you haven't heard from a title company, to me, it just means that there's probably some problems with the title. But you'll hear. The agent will be one of the first people to hear, because they hope that you have something in your file someplace that'll solve the problem, so you don't have to go back and scare your client. But the best example I like to think of is, of course, probates. And agents will get a call from the daughter of someone who just passed away and say, you know, we're planning to move to Arizona and we just want to sell the property. I know it's a wonderful house and my parents built it themselves, and we're not going to live there, so we want to sell it. And so the agent says, okay, I'll be out to look at the house, and we'll sign a contract and we'll get it listed. And the probate hasn't even been completed in the court, and it's listed on the MLS. And your poor client falls in love with it and thinks they're going to be able to move at the end of the school year and be in the property before the new school year, and they haven't even probated and don't even know the status of the probate. And that drives me crazy. So personally, I will look just on the tax records. I'm not a title company, just to see who the owner is, especially when it's an older house and a young person who calls me saying they want to sell it. So the seller's agent, you quite often will know that it needs to go through probate, but they don't necessarily put it in the listing. So just be careful when your buyers are buying something out of probate. Okay. Now the deed, and if you guys probably remember memorizing all of this when you got your license. So let me just reiterate: it has to have who's buying it and who's selling it, how much they're paying for it, and then Texas, as you know, is a non-disclosure state, so they put $10 in there. It really annoys me, because it would be easier if we knew how much the seller bought it for. And if there's any kind of covenants in there, you know, like those CCR restrictions, it has to have a legal property description, and that description has to. And I had a sale recently where the description was wrong, and the description in the last deed was wrong. The description that the taxing authority had was wrong. And so the title company had to correct it. And it was, the buyer got really kind of stressed out, saying, whoa, I am buying, 1.5 acres, right? I'm not, this is because the description only, when they sent out their surveyor, it was only about half of that. So the description was just wrong. So we had to correct it, and the title company had to correct it. And it tells you where the grantor got title from, because you want to know, and the seller signs it. Now, I just want to mention really quickly, let me go down to the next page. The form of title, when I talk about community property, I want to mention why sometimes the buyer has to sign the deed. Okay, so I go over with the title, the client. I say at some point during this closing process, hopefully not too late, not too close to the closing date, the title company will call you up and ask you, how do you plan to hold title to this property? And so I go over the different options ways you can hold property. Now, of course, and they all have legal consequences. That's why I like to tell the client to talk to somebody at the title company, usually a title company, if they don't have their own lawyer. Many people have their own lawyers they can talk to about this. Okay, so the first one, of course, they can always put it in a trust. And that's when one person is in control of the property for the benefit of someone else. Or you can put in a business organization. A lot of people like to put them in LLCs or C corporations, because they want to protect themselves from any kind of liability, especially if they're going to be an investor. And you can own the property as an individual, meaning just one person's name on the deed. A lot of people nowadays are not necessarily buying them as couples. People are not getting married as much as they used to. So quite often there's individuals, and it just says they're selling this house to one person, one John Doe. But in the case of buying property with more than one owner, there are several options you can have. I'll backtrack real quickly. If you're planning to, if a client thinks they're planning to use any of these homeowner assistance programs, to help get money, or if they're buying it using any of the federal programs like FHA or VA, you can't use a trust or business organization without getting approval first. Okay, so you don't want that delaying your closing. You want to make sure that the title company gets does the paperwork for you. They'll charge you so that you can get approval before you get to closing. Okay, so the first type, if there's, as you know, on a deed, you can have 1,000 people's name on a deed, but let's assume it's just 2 people. So it makes it easier for my description. So the first type is tenants in common, and that's important if the 2 people want to own shares, want to have unequal shares. And that happens a lot with investors, sometimes brother and sister, and one person is going to be maintaining the property, and the other person will be not paying as much on the maintenance or the mortgage or whatever it is, and they just want that reflected in their ownership. So they can say that one person owns 75%, the other person owns 25%, and it'll be right there in the deed. Now, the consequences of tenants in common is that each person owns it individually, and they can leave their shares to someone other than the other person they own it with. So they can leave it to their children and not the other partner in the arrangement. And the next type is joint tenants with right of survivorship, and it's exactly what it sounds like. It means that if you own it together, the 2 people own it together, then if one of them passes away, the other person automatically gets their share. And in that case, even if you don't go to court, and it's not part of the probate estate, you don't have to probate it or anything, they automatically get that share. That's why some people choose that form of ownership. But you cannot make it unequal shares, it's equal shares. And the next one is community property. Everyone knows Texas is a community property state. If you're married and you don't designate one of these other forms of ownership in the deed, it automatically defaults to community property. And as you know, if you try to sell a house and it's community property, you have to get both spouses to sign it. And in Texas, it also comes with a right of survivorship. So it means that if you, but the right of survivorship depends on whether or not you have a will, and if it's intestate, you don't necessarily get the spouse doesn't necessarily get 100%. It depends on whether there's children from both parents or not from both parents. And of course, lastly, as you know, in Texas, we have what we call, this is technically called an informal marriage, but in general, we call it a common law marriage, where people have lived together for many years, and then they hold themselves out as married. They call each other spouse by say, "This is my wife," but they're not really married. And in Texas, it's recognized as a marriage and community property. And the most important thing to remember about these is that you can go to the courthouse, fill out a form that says, and this year is 2023, and say, we've been living together since 1999, since last year, and your marriage will be 3 years of marriage if you fill out that form. And a lot of people don't understand that, because then they think that they filled out the form in 2023, but they didn't realize that they own that house in community property since 1999, because that's the date that they put on their informal marriage certificate. And that's important for people to know. Now, I've had closings where the 2 parties bought a house together and they were not married, but the title company, and this was during the COVID, when they weren't letting the agents into the closing. I know Chris said he goes anyway, but they tell us, oh, you can wait out in the car and we'll bring you your papers. But anyway, I've had them have the wrong information on the deed, and I didn't see it until the client showed it to me, and I said, hey, they're not married. And so it's that's a tough one. I told them to talk to a lawyer about what they need to do on that deed. And I don't know what they decided, but they did go back to the title company and talk about the fact that they listed them as spouses on the deed when they really weren't married. Okay, let's talk about the walkthrough. of course, we have a walkthrough. You have a form. Make sure you have the walkthrough forms. We have them in JPAR has them in Boss, so you can get them from your title company you use, whoever. There's always you always should use a walkthrough form. And I always at the walkthrough have the agent's number handy so I can call them in a hurry. And there's usually some standard things that you see, like damage to the floor when you move a rug because the rug's been moved, or the holes in the wall where the big screen television was. And so you really need to make sure. Oh, and nowadays, because we have so many sellers who want to stay, as part, and we let them do it. Okay, we let them stay, and sometimes, a lot of times, it's without them paying rent. That there really is no real walkthrough, because they don't have to really tell you when they're moving out. And I warn the client about that. They don't know, but we have to have this house. We have to, because we have to go to this school district, and they have to get into UT and become lawyers, and they'll be a deadbeat. We always, you try to calm them down and tell them, yeah, there's some issues here that we need to figure out what to do. And I always put it in writing. I always send them, when I say in writing, I always send them an email. Okay, we talked about the problems with having a walkthrough. We talked about that it's supposed to be broom clean, not spotless, broom clean. And if they left, a little bit of mold in the shower, that's not an excuse not to close. And you just have to have a conversation with the buyers, because they do think the house is supposed to look like it's new. But I remind them that your agent will be by your side through all of this. Okay, and then we talked about closing. So this is my last slide, and I always talk to them about some miscellaneous things associated with closing. Now that when we get to this the closing issues, I talk about the iBuyers, and how we had I think we had that day we discussed them when we had Ann showing us a bunch of different items on MLS. But that's I summarize what the difference between buying a property from one of these internet on the internet from one of those organizations, as opposed to buying it from a seller who you can have some negotiations with, you can talk to. We talk about homesteads and what they are, and the fact that if you don't notify the taxing authority, you won't get your homestead exemption. And homesteads in Texas, as you know, are exempt property from any of your creditors, except, of course, people that that were secured by either a mortgage or a UCC or something. But the car company that you buy your car from, and they have a lien against your car, can't take your house to pay for the car. I explained to them, now is the time to get your will. Now that you own a property that's worth, the average in Austin area is around $400,000, and now that you have that, you need to get a will and decide what you want to happen to with your property. And as you know, all the people, when they buy their first house, they all go out and buy. They all go buy all this expensive IKEA furniture, and they put a new car in the driveway, and so you need a will. You buy all this extra stuff. We talk about homeowner insurance. I know when they shopped around for homeowner insurance for the closing, they tried to get the cheapest policy they could. And then I start to talk to them about, hey, we get hailstorms 2 or 3 times a year here in Central Texas. You would need to talk about it. If you're interested in putting some solar panels up there, we talk about how the home insurance is affected by that. The gist of that conversation is that things will change now. So whatever changes to your house you make, the homeowner insurance needs to keep up. And I remind them that they need to put away all of their information from the closing, especially the financial information, because they will need it for their tax documentation, whether it's income taxes or real estate taxes. The first time they file their taxes for income tax purposes back in April, or if they want to complain about the taxes jumping from the day they bought the house to the day they filed their first real estate taxes, they need that documentation. So make sure they put away that documentation someplace where they can easily get it. That's all I have for today. So I'm willing to accept any questions.
Thank you,
Hey,
Deborah. That was amazing. I did
Thank
have
you,
a
Deborah.
question.
That was amazing. That was
That was awesome.
textbook presentation. I call it textbook because not very many people are making textbook presentation nowadays. It's excellent. Anybody has any questions for Deborah?
yeah,
I did,
Oh.
on that initial loan disclosure page, you talked about it not including the HOA information. Do you know if they add, if there's a PID, if they add the PID on there or not? I was just curious if you knew that.
It's usually included with the taxes. You know,
Okay.
if because it depends on the type of loan, because sometimes the loan doesn't include insurance and taxes. But if the taxes are included, the PID is usually included with the taxes.
Okay.
hey, Deborah, that was so informative. Thank you.
You're
Yeah.
welcome.
I had a question on slide 19. You know, you said that if the total household income was less than, did you say $175,000? I'm not sure what that number was.
Yes, I said $175,000, but you know what you can do is if you go in the MLS and you go to down payment and you click on it on one of the, okay, JPAR's MLS ribbon has an option for down payment assistance programs. And you click on that and it'll give you a list of about 100 different home buyer assistance programs in Texas. And most of them are associated with TSAC. So if you haven't taken that they have some, they have, I think it's Strec approved. I think it is. Okay, they do a course on home buyer assistance for agents. And if you haven't
Great.
taken it, that's a good one. That's a
Okay,
good
and you said TSAC? I've never
Yeah,
heard of it. What is
I
the
think
name?
it's TSACH.
There's an
That's-
H in the TSH.
Oh, TSHA.
AC.
TSHAC, and yeah, it is Trek approved. I just took the course like yesterday or
Oh, you did. Good. Good. Now, did they tell you how much money they had left?
no, they didn't. They didn't tell me
Okay.
that they run out in July either.
Okay. No, they usually don't tell, but I'm just telling you, that's as long as I've been involved with people who are trying to get that money, they run out around July.
I had no idea. That's really good to know.
You know, I wish I had you for my agent when I bought this house. None of this was presented to us when I first bought a house, period. It's
But that
amazing how
doesn't
much
mean your
information we have.
agent, but that doesn't mean your agent wasn't doing that for you. That's the thing that it's hard to get
Yeah.
across to clients, is that there's a lot of things we do in the background that
True.
they're not familiar with. Or sometimes we tell them, we'll text them and say, oh, I'm taking care of that for you. They forget about it. And they don't really realize how important it is, you know, that all of the things that we do for them.
I feel like I should have got a law degree before I tried this. I'm like, wow, this is a lot.
Any other questions for Deborah? Thank you, Deborah. Thank you so much. It's a
Absolutely.
great presentation. We appreciate that.